Welcome back to another episode of Simply Robotics, the podcast, a podcast exploring the animation industry one episode at a time. This week, y'all are finally getting the episode I have been wanting for y'all for a long time. So long story short, over the summer of 2020, the year whose name shall not be spoken, I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. And then towards like the end of the summer, I watched The Legend of Korra, and I couldn't think of better people to have on this episode than my two friends, Jen and Marcus, who, as we get into the episode, they're no strangers to the show. And throughout watching Avatar and Legend of Korra, I was texting them like crazy. Like I was going through the motions, and those were the two people that I knew. Well, first off, they loved this both shows so much that it only felt right to have them. So I knew that they would be able to help me in that time watching the shows, but also would make great guests for this episode. So I'm not going to hold you any longer. Let's get into the show. So I have my guests, Jen and Marcus, here with me, and I'm not going to waste everyone's time with like an interview because Jen, she was on the third episode of this show, which was great before I had like any form of structure or anything, and I was just like, doing podcast stuff. And Marcus was on episode 16 where we talked about The Great Mouse Detective. So I brought both of you here today because both of you guys are, like I say, super mega fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. And when I watched it for the first time this summer, I was texting both of you through all my feelings, and it just made sense for me to bring you both together. So I guess I'll actually start off with saying, why do you guys like love this show so much, and like, did you watch it when it originally aired?
Well,
You can go first,
I
Beth.
first watched it. Yeah, sorry, I was like, let's go. I first watched it when it first came out. I guess I was like 14 or 15 at the time, and I remember accidentally tuning in for like the world premiere of it because I just happened to be watching Nickelodeon at the time, and I was just like, what is this like anime looking shit? That's like, I was so confused. And then I literally in like the opening scene, Katara calls Sokka sexist. And I was just like, can they say that on Nickelodeon? Like, what is this show? Like, what? We're doing anime now? Like, okay. And for me, what drew me to it was, I mean, honestly, the same thing that drew me to actual, like, Japanese animation was it's so rare to find American cartoons that have a continuing storyline and story arcs and characters that actually change over the course of seasons. So for me, as like just someone who really only watched animation, like this was just something I was so like I didn't know how much I was craving it. And then as I've gotten older, like I can appreciate its nuances so much more. And like when I look at it, it's the kind of thing that it's like, oh, I want to make things like that. Like that's like when I think about like trying to be a writer, trying to tell stories, like this is like for me like a benchmark thing that's like motivated me most of my life at this point. Yeah.
Should not have let Jen go on first. How am I supposed to follow that? Oh, so my story was a little different. I happened to wake up on a Sunday afternoon and was like, huh, what's this on the TV?
That's
I fell asleep watching SpongeBob. I woke up to, I think, like the last 5 minutes of the first episode. So I was like, the hell? And I've just found a way to like watch it again. And I just was like, no, this is interesting. And what like really sold me was Zuko. I was all here for the angst and the I gotta get my honor back. That's what really sucked me in. I was like, I like him. He has a motive. He's going places. So that's what really
Okay.
sucked me in. Him and Sokka. Like those were like the two people that sucked me in.
I can I can now appreciate both of those people. Yeah, when this first came out, I was not interested because I don't like anime visually. So I was like, this is horrible. This is like Americanized anime. Like I'm definitely not watching this. And then now, like, yeah, 15 years later, I'm like, okay, everyone is still really hyped about this. I should probably watch it so I can understand why. And I do. And I also wonder what it would have been like watching it as a 15-year-old also, but
It
whatever.
was very emotional times. It was very emotional. And it felt like it was kind of niche at the same time because not a lot of people was really talking about it. Well, in my circle, so I would be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, y'all should watch this." And they'd be like, "What?" And I'd be like, "Fine, I don't need you. I'll watch it myself."
Oh yeah, no. It was like for me, we were at an age where it was like very uncool to watch cartoons still, and it was even more taboo to watch like anime. So I had this thing and I had like no one to talk to about it for a really long time. And then when I went to college, I met friends who everybody was like loved this show, and I was like, oh, finally. And there was, I mean, to be fair, there was an anime club at my high school, and it was like just that small little room where like we could talk about it. But it was just like this amazing thing, and I was just like, no one will watch this because it's a cartoon, and that's ridiculous. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So we're gonna go through the journey of all the books of not only Avatar, but also, well, yeah, Aang's Avatar, but Korra's Avatar as well.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna start off with book one from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and you guys can take turns on who goes first, but we'll all share about like your favorite moments. And I said least favorite moments, but it could also just be like it's not as good of a moment,
Mhm.
depending how critiquey you want to be. So yeah, book one was Water, and go for it.
I'll go
You
first
go
this
first.
time. So as I said, I was all here for. I got to look at my notes. I was all here for
Yeah.
Zuko's teen angst. So when I seen the episode where General Zhao caught Aang and Zuko was like, "Yeah, nah, screw that. If I'm not getting him, nobody's getting him." And the blue
So that's
mask came on and he broke Aang out just so the other guy so he couldn't say he had him. That's when I was like, "Oh, I love that." That was like the peak of the book one for me. And the low was the Great Divide. I hated that episode. I
same. That was
hated that episode. Like
Okay, tell
most of my
people.
like on my notes, I'm just letting you know, on my notes, most of my hates are like the filler episodes. Some of the filler episodes are terrible.
yeah.
But the Great Divide is where they're supposed to be trying to get through this path, and they have to go through this tunnel, and they had their like their recycled version of the Hatfield and McCoys, and Aang had to try to bring them together and all. I just was like, oh my god, I hate this. I was like, if y'all could just the Fire Nation could come and just kill all of them, and I truly would not have any. I wouldn't miss a beat. It'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that
Literally
was
the
the
one. Yeah, the one on mine is literally I just wrote the Great Divide. Like
that's what I did
For the
too in
same
all
reason?
caps.
it was just like such a there I feel like there's not a lot of like true filler in Avatar. Like there are that definitely like scale more towards filler, but the Great Divide is like truly the worst. Like it's just it doesn't add anything. It's frustrating. The conclusion, like there's all the setups they have, like there's no actual payoff. Like it's just like what happened, guys? Like they just dropped the ball in that one episode and like they're allowed it. And like my friends and I on our podcast, we were like trying to be constructive about it, and it's like it's also just a little unfair because this show has so many amazing episodes and moments and things, so it's like their worst thing, like you're also just gonna be that much more harsh, but it's just like it's so frustrating.
So
Like
my
you,
like low moment is super childish now compared to y'all. Because my moment was like I don't like Jet because I don't like how he was toying with Katara. So
so
Jet was like Katara's like fake love interest type of thing. Like she had a crush on him,
Mhm.
and he just had his own, thing that he was trying to get revenge or like no, that's not the word revenge, but what's the
Like
word?
vengeance maybe, but like
Oh yeah, avenge, not revenge. It's avenge, his people. I think it was his parents or something that got killed by the Fire Nation.
yeah.
So yeah, he was just being manipulative and I didn't like him.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I feel like for me, it's been interesting having watched the show, and like it's not like I hadn't watched it since I was 15. Like I see, like they used to have rerun it all the time, but then now as like a 31-year-old, like it's been interesting where it's like I feel like with back then, like I had very different feelings about Jet, and then now I'm like a lot more conflicted because I was like, there's so much bad things in his life that
Yeah.
like and I'm not saying you don't understand where he's coming from either, but I was just like I'm like that. Like for me, like the only other least favorite, like I can't think of anything, but like there are times where like Sokka would annoy me, but it's like not enough that it's like a least favorite. Like and like Sokka was one of those characters when I was a kid, he annoyed the crap out of me. Like I did not like him at all. I was like he's annoying. Like I just never liked those kind of like funny guy characters. And then as an adult, I'm just like, oh, like, I love you. Like, what is happening? Like, and he's still sometimes annoying, but like, that's also his character a little bit. So it's fine.
Did you mention like one of your favorite moments from book one?
Oh, I feel like one of my favorites, I guess broadly speaking, is like the storm, like just that whole episode. So the storm, that's the episode where we learn like Zuko's backstory with the Agni Kai, and then we learn like Aang's story of learning he was the Avatar at a really young age, and then like getting scared and fleeing, and then getting trapped in the ice. And I feel like I appreciate that this show can have an episode like that. That's like, there's not really action in this episode too much. Like, it's like kind of a slower burn episode, and it's like all this like exposition and backstory. And like, I feel like this show took so many, not risks, but they feel like risks, like knowing how a lot of cartoons treat like kids' attention spans and like ability to perceive things, where it's like that episode, it's like so much happens, and it's where it's like that's like the one that sums it up really well.
I had
the song was really good.